All right, welcome in. Hope everybody out there is having a fantastic weekend. Coming up on today's San Francisco 49ers Report, over the last few Fridays, I've been joining Larry Krueger on his show, The Krug Show, at 10:45 a.m. Pacific. Been doing radio in the Bay Area for a long time, and now his YouTube channel is off to a terrific start with a lot of success. I'll put the link to subscribe to his channel down in the description of this video, but I've really enjoyed making appearances over there. I think we've been able to give some people some good 49ers analysis that's been engaging and informative. So coming up on the 49ers Report, this platform, just thought we'd give you some more content. So this is going to be the first of two videos coming your way today. The first one, great conversation about Brock Purdy and some staggering, shocking numbers that he's been able to put up to start his career, which now spans about 17 games. So stay tuned for that. And then later, a separate video. What's the biggest concern for San Francisco going up against this Buccaneers team that's going to be feisty on Sunday? Watch party coming your way on Sunday right here on the 49ers Report, the best place to experience game day outside of being at the actual game. We'll see you then, so make sure you subscribe. And for now, two videos from my appearance with Larry Krueger on Friday.
You know, it's funny. There's always, people are so passionate about the NFL that they do not wait for the numbers or the facts to back up their case. They oftentimes just go with what they see. And a perfect example of that has been the coverage of Brock Purdy. People have said, people have described him as dink-and-dunk because they look at him and they say, oh, well, he's not, and they were comparing him to Trey Lance this summer. He's not 6'4", 240, so Trey's got to be bigger and stronger and faster and has a better arm down the field. And so it was like, we don't want Brock because Brock's dink-and-dunk. Well, now here we are. Brock Purdy has thrown the ball beyond 20 yards 6 times this year. He's or against Jacksonville, I should say, 6 times in that game. Beyond 20 yards, and went 6 for 6 with 3 touchdowns and was credited with a couple big-time throws on those long passes from PFF. On the season, Chase, Purdy has 37 attempts behind the line of scrimmage. He's thrown the ball over 20 yards 30 times. Yeah. He's 20 of 30, and 2 of those have been drops, so you've got roughly a 73% completion percentage. He's also thrown the second most touchdown passes over 20 yards, has the second highest passer rating, and the Niners have the best DVOA offensively by a comfortable margin largely because of this. They're at 66.6%, and the Texans are number 2, despite the fact the Niners have gone against the 6th toughest schedule. I guess it's interesting. So many people look at Brock and say, he's Captain Checkdown. But that's really not what he is. In fact, if anything, he's probably kind of a little bit of Brett Favre in a smaller body who wants to go for it. And he's got to be kind of reined in. And I asked him yesterday about, balancing being smart and patient and taking what the defense gives you versus staying aggressive. And he says it's a constant battle. But isn't that interesting how the dink and dunk moniker was thrown around with such confidence, when in reality this player is kind of the opposite of that.
The quarterback position is the second most talked about position of power in America behind the President of the United States. Everybody has bold opinions about quarterbacks, and a lot of people look at a player like Josh Allen, or back in the day, pre-draft, a player like Jamarcus Russell. They can throw it 60, 70, 80 yards. They're 6'5", 6'6", 250. They can move around. They can sling it. They have a rubber band of an arm, and it's unbelievable the physical attributes that they have. The quarterback position does not always come down to physical attributes. Peyton Manning was slow. He never had a bazooka. Tom Brady, solid arm, solid athleticism. Joe Montana really didn't do much special athletically, and arm-wise, it's not like he was a pitcher throwing 100 miles per hour with a rising fastball that gets you swinging every time you're up at the dish. With Brock Purdy, he has some of the special attributes that you look for in quarterbacks. It's quick processing. It's being able to make improvisational plays out of structure. It's the ability to read what the defense is doing. It's touch. It's accuracy. I think a couple of things really stand out with Purdy as far as his arm. It is very impressive when you can layer throws in there to that second level. Some of the quarterbacks with really strong arms are unable to do that. And those throws that go 20, 30 yards that you talk about, momentum changers, drive changers, big chunks, those are explosive plays by definition. And Purdy has been able to target that area of the field. And while he doesn't have height at 6'4", and he might not have a physical profile of some of these ridiculous athletes that we see, Brock Purdy, if you think about like his 10-yard split or his short area quickness and his ability to kind of wheel out of the pocket, which Tony Romo made special back in the day, and make throws downfield like he did to Brandon Ayuk last week. How about the throw to George Kittle? I mean, I know that it was supposed to be a quick hitter, I think, to Ayuk. So because of that, it wasn't a deep drop. But on that 66-yard touchdown, Purdy saw one receiver pumped, and then he saw, oh, Kittle's on a wheel against Devin Lloyd, has a little bit of separation, off platform, off base, not able to really stride and drive the football, flicks it up there, drops it right in the bucket in stride to George Kittle. If a Patrick Mahomes did that, it would take over the entire internet. If Mahomes made the play on the touchdown to Ayuk where he rolls, thought about running, and then just kind of flicks it up there over two defensive backs right to Ayuk at the back of the end zone. Bad decision, great result. If that was Patrick Mahomes, people are going to go crazy. And then lastly, these numbers are wild, and sometimes the numbers don't lie, but when you watch the quick processing and the acceleration of his mind, that's part of the eye test. And then you look at the numbers. Shout out to Coach Yak. He tweeted this out a couple of days ago. Brock Purdy among all quarterbacks. Passer rating 1, QBR 1, yards per attempt 1, adjusted EPA per play number 1, big time throw rate number 5, completion percentage number 7, and then passer rating under pressure. Very important for quarterbacks. Completion percentage under pressure. That's why Tom Brady was so great. YPA under pressure, all number 1. And then lastly, if you were to translate his career right now to 17 games, you include the Miami game where he replaced Jimmy Garoppolo, which he pretty much did in the first quarter, played the whole game. And then you take out the NFC Championship game against Philadelphia where he got knocked out early when Hassan Reddick injured his elbow. His numbers over 17 games, full season sample size, Larry, 68% completion percentage, nearly 4,200 yards, 31 touchdowns, 8 picks, 8.9 yards per attempt, and 110.5 passer rating. Those numbers, if that was a top 5 pick over the course of their first 17 games, this would be one of the biggest talking points. But because Brock Purdy isn't that sexy athlete with the rocket ship of an arm, that's why people kind of still say, Mr. Irrelevant. He's a product of Kyle Shanahan's system, but he's executing the system nearly flawlessly, and those numbers are ridiculous.
Yeah, no, and those passer rating numbers would have been first in the league. And I asked Kittle yesterday in the locker room about that throw. I said, were you surprised he had so much on that throw? And he's like, no. I go, even after you watched it, where he basically didn't get to reset, didn't follow through, was in a muddied pocket, kind of had to kind of contort himself to get it out there. And he's like, no, that's what I expect from Brock. And he put lots on it, and he led me to the open spot there. So, yeah, I mean, it is amazing how there's just so many people that are so hesitant. And it's funny. I was on the radio with Mark Willard the other day on 95.7 The Game, and he called it NFL draftism. It's not ageism, it's not racism, it's NFL draftism.
I like that.
In other words, if Purdy had been a first-round pick, people would maybe be giving him more love, but because he's Mr. Irrelevant, he's the highest of high-profile late-round picks.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, when's midnight going to strike? When's this guy going to turn into a pumpkin? And then there's a lot of Niner fans, and I'm sure you experienced this doing Niner content, Chase. There's a lot of Niner fans that are scarred by Jimmy Garoppolo. I believe that Jimmy was the guy. He got off to a fast start. I bought his jersey. He came up, snake eyes. It's like he couldn't complete passes down the field or outside the numbers late in his career, and he just regressed significantly. And I think there's a lot of people that are just like, I'm not going to believe in Brock Purdy because I believed in Jimmy, and Jimmy wasn't the guy. And that's how narrow their scope is. And so they're just like, well, if I believed in Jimmy and Jimmy wasn't the guy, I'm not going to believe in this guy either, because possibly 10 games from now, 20 games from now, we may realize that this guy's not the guy. And all I would say to them is they're two totally different quarterbacks, two totally different people. And I would just forget that you even saw Jimmy. I mean, it's just don't just draw all roads do not lead back to Jimmy Garoppolo. You know what I mean? But when you have a limited focus and a limited sample size of quarterbacks you're comparing him to, I can see why people would be like, I got burned on Jimmy. I'm not going to get burned on this.
Yeah, no, I see the same thing with a lot of people who interact with me on the show and then online as well. And look, with Jimmy Garoppolo, he comes in, they make the trade, he goes 5-0 down the stretch. They make him the highest paid quarterback in the history of football at the time. Comes back, expectations are high for Kyle Shanahan and the Niners. He injures his knee, he's out. 2019 helps lead them to the Super Bowl. It's actually laughable if you look back at the playoff run, how few times he actually threw the football. And he had some great moments.
It was like nine.
Yeah, against the Packers, I'm pretty sure.
Packers and Vikings, he had like 9 pass attempts in 2 games. And when he had to pass against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, it was a disaster.
Yeah, 2019 season, it was a special season for San Francisco. 2020, he gets hurt. 2021, they draft Trey Lance, and he helps the Niners overcome a 3-5 start. He goes on the road against Dallas, on the road against Aaron Rodgers and the number 1 seeded Green Bay Packers, beats them to put the Niners in the NFC Championship game. And then the following year, last year, he has an opportunity after Lance goes down. He's hurt again. Look, what you can't have from a quarterback is continued injuries, and he was always injured. Did he have some great moments? Did he have some clutch moments? Did at one point people think that he was going to be the guy? Yes, he wasn't the guy. Was still a very solid player for San Francisco. But let me just ask you this to bring Brock Purdy into this conversation, everybody out there. Who would you rather play at the quarterback position right now? Brock Purdy or Jimmy Garoppolo? Brock Purdy has unlocked a completely different element to this Niners offense. They are so much more explosive. Brock Purdy is spraying the ball all over the field, whereas Jimmy Garoppolo used to really just live in between the hashes, in between the numbers. Purdy's success 20-plus yards downfield has made this team an explosive passing offense in which they can oftentimes take the top off of the defense. And I think they could be even more explosive if Kyle Shanahan had a legit speed weapon out there, just dialed up more vertical routes. But Purdy has this offense playing at a completely different level than Jimmy Garoppolo, and he's playing as a quarterback so much better than Jimmy Garoppolo ever was. If you're a Niner fan, what you want is solid play from the quarterback position, and you're getting that right now. I'm not saying that Purdy is going to be the next Joe Montana, but what he's done in a 17-game sample size, think about it. If any other quarterback did that with the draftism that you alluded to, Larry, who was drafted inside the top 5, top 10, people would be just going nuts. Look at how people are talking about CJ Stroud right now. MVP of the league. Yet Brock Purdy is still Mr. Irrelevant, and people are still worried about Jimmy Garoppolo, who was the lesser player.
Kyle Shanahan went on KMBR, and a lot of the people who are critics of Brock say he's only good because he's got Ayuk and Debo and Trent and Kittle and CMC and this and that. And then Shanahan went on there and said, hey, Brock is good on his own. He doesn't need to depend on other players to win games. And immediately all the fans are like, Kyle's taking shots at Jimmy. Did you think Kyle was taking a shot at Jimmy?
I didn't, but also at the same time, if there's a little bit of bad blood between those two, that wouldn't surprise me because Jimmy Garoppolo would ghost people for the entire offseason. Would Tom Brady ever do that? Would Brock Purdy ever do that? Would Peyton Manning just not answer his coach's calls or text messages? Would Joe Montana do that to Bill Walsh? Absolutely no way. And when you handle yourself like that, in such a position of importance, the quarterback position, face of the franchise, I imagine Kyle Shanahan, who loves ball, who probably wakes up at 3 a.m. sometimes because the creativeness in his brain is just flowing and he's just drawing up plays. Like, he loves ball. So he shoots Jimmy Garoppolo ideas, or he wants to chop it up with his quarterback, who he went out and acquired, who they made the highest paid quarterback in the history of football at the time. And you're just not going to respond. And then you show back up at the facility in training camp. You're like, hey guys, I'm back. It's like, bro, Did you just like miss all of my calls and text messages? So from a head coach to the quarterback, I believe that relationship is very important. And there may have been a little bit of crack in there on the fault of Jimmy Garoppolo, but also let's be real. Like, we know that Kyle Shanahan can be pretty stubborn. And I imagine in some of those meeting rooms, when he would see something on tape that he didn't like, he would call out Jimmy G. And maybe Jimmy G was a little bit sensitive to it. And frankly, Shanahan probably got frustrated with Jimmy Garoppolo continuing to get injured every year, because the lack of stability at the quarterback position, especially when you enter a fragile quarterback into the conversation, I can't imagine how maddening that would be for a head coach.